Dear students, today we are going to discuss the topic crop domestication and loss of genetic diversity. Objectives of the present lecture: to give basic idea about the process of crop domestication, to know about the major centers of crop domestication, to understand about domestication of major crops, to know about the loss of genetic diversity with respect to crop domestication, and finally to know about genetic diversity reintroduction methods. Introduction. Plant domestication is the process whereby wild plants have been evolved into crop plants through artificial selection. This usually involves an early hybridization event followed by selective breeding. It is estimated that 2,500 plant species have undergone domestication worldwide, with over 160 families contributing one or more crop species. Much of our understanding of the processes driving domestication comes from a subset of well-studied crops, particularly crops of major economic importance and model crops. That's crops that have had their genomes analyzed and are transformable. These crops have been critical for developing our fundamental understanding of domestication as a continuum of ongoing processes. In particular, they have been critical for revealing the underlying genetic mechanisms responsible for the suite of phenotypic changes associated with domestication that comprise the domestication syndrome. They have also contributed to our knowledge of useful crop breeding traits such as pathogen resistance and of fundamental biological processes such as polyploidization. Crop domestication. Crop domestication is a process by which crop plants are genetically modified over time by humans for traits that are more advantageous or desirable for humans. For example, if a human notices that one particular plant in the field is taller and taller plants are considered more valuable, he may choose seed from the plant to grow new plants. Since the individual plants selected likely contain gene for the trait they were selected for, their progeny are more likely to inherit that trait. For many crops, domestication has rendered the plant completely dependent on humans, such that it is no longer capable of propagating itself in nature. Maize and cauliflower are good examples of such highly modified forms. However, other crops such as hemp, carrot, and lettuce have been more modestly modified compared to their progenitors, and they can either revert to the wild or become self-propagating weeds. Our human ancestors began this process by selecting teosinte, the ancestor of maize, that had bigger kernels and more rows of kernels. Over time, they probably also selected for other useful traits such as kernels that did not shatter, that fall off from the plant, exposed kernels lacking the outer protective part of the kernel, and higher yield. Eventually, a new type was formed, what we know now as maize or corn. Because the traits selected for are advantageous to humans but not necessarily advantageous for the plants. These newly developed plants have often lost the ability to survive in the wild without humans. For example, the large kernels of contemporary maize ears are not easily dispersed by wind or birds. If left alone in the wild, they would simply fall to the ground, where they would sprout in a heap, too close together to be able to grow into big healthy plants. And while some plant seeds are dispersed through ingestion by animals, maize kernels are more thoroughly digested such that they are no longer viable when expelled. Thus, they cannot be dispersed in this way. Some of the traits that have been selected for by humans but which are not healthy for a plant in the wild include retention of mature seed on the plant, synchronous ripening, shorter maturity, lower content of bitter tasting and harmful compounds, reduced sprouting, larger seed or fruit size, elimination of seeds such as in banana. Because consumers prefer uniformity in the marketplace, They select for low genetic diversity, but low genetic diversity can be detrimental. Diversity usually remains in the wild relatives of the crop species, however, and can be reintroduced by intentional plant breeding. The domestication syndrome, the suite of traits that marks a crop's divergence from its wild ancestors, is defined as the domestication syndrome. A domestication syndrome describes the properties that distinguish a certain crop from its wild progenitor. Typically, such characteristics are larger fruits or grains, more robust plants, more determinate growth or increased apical dominance, loss of natural seed dispersal, fewer fruits or grains, decrease in bitter substance in edible structure, change in photoperiod sensitivity. It has been hypothesized and in many cases demonstrated that the domestication also has reduced physical and chemical defenses compared to their wild counterparts. Centers of plant domestication. All the major crops around the world were domesticated from a wild progenitor species primarily between 4,000 and 10,000 years ago. Often, there have been multiple rounds of domestication and or breeding where the initial domestication event resulted in primitive land races with an indeterminate level of domestication and where modern plant breeding has resulted in varieties or cultivars that conform to the modern idiotype. The idiotype is the hypothetical ideal plant form that is thought to maximize genetic yield potential. At each of these domestication and breeding steps, profound changes to the germplasm occurred, where the more domesticated germplasm pools have a narrow range of genotypic diversity. In some cases, the domesticates have broader phenotypic diversity as exemplified by the fruit shape, size, and color in tomato. And in other cases, cultivars have narrow phenotypic diversity relative to less domesticated land races, as is the case in maize. The geographic region where domestication began and where most of a crop's genetic diversity resides is typically referred to as the crop's center of origin. Although many secondary centers of diversity can be considered, there are 6 primary centers of origin around the world: China, Southeast Asia, the Fertile Crescent encompassing regions from Mesopotamia to the eastern Mediterranean to northern Egypt, Sub-Saharan Africa, Mesoamerica, and South America. Germplasm banks have been assembled for all of the major crops by sampling the diversity present around the world, but in particular from the centers of origin. As early as 1859, Darwin observed that the modifications occurring during domestication have been of such magnitudes that many domesticated crops cannot survive in the wild. In addition to phenotypic changes of the domestication syndrome, a species genome also undergoes changes during domestication. During domestication, genetic variation across the genome is moderately reduced in the domesticate relative to the progenitor due to a genetic bottleneck associated with the sampling process. That is, only a small number of wild plants were chosen for domestication. The relative loss of diversity varies greatly depending on the species. Genes targeted by artificial selection during domestication and or improvement have greatly reduced variation, as the combined effect of the population bottleneck and selection is much more severe. The number of selected genes and the strength of selection is also variable between species. These reductions in genetic diversity affect the breeding and genetics of the domesticate, as loci with greatly reduced variation are not able to contribute to phenotypic variation. They cannot be identified as QTL and cannot be used to improve the crops by breeding. Domestication of major crop species. A brief sketch of the domestication and breeding histories of various crop species is useful to demonstrate commonalities in the domestication syndrome across crops. Indeed, selection for non-shattering was a primary domestication trait in maize, rice, and wheat. Although it appears that different genes were targeted by selection in each species, however, each species also has unique aspects to its domestication and breeding history that make breeding and genetics studies in the modern crop challenging in its own right. Barley. Early studies of barley suggested a single domestication event from Hardium vulgare species approximately 10,500 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. However, a recent study suggests two independent domestication events, where wild barley form two distinct geographical clusters. The wild barleys from the western region of the Fertile Crescent contributed the majority of the diversity found in the European and American barley cultivars, whereas the wild barleys east of the Zagros Mountains contributed to the diversity of the Central Asian and Far Eastern cultivars. Two-row barley cultivars have lower protein and higher fermentable sugar content, desirable characteristics for malting and fermentation, whereas six-row barley cultivars tend to have higher protein content and are best suited for animal feed. The earliest target trait has been proposed to be non-shattering, followed by a change from 2 to 6 rowed spikes and selection for free threshing grains. Wheat. Wheat has a very complex evolutionary history due to polyploidization and distinct market classes. Approximately 5 lakh years ago in the Fertile Crescent, two diploid progenitors, Triticum auratum and Aegilops speltoides, hybridized to form the tetraploid species Triticum dicocoides. This tetraploid species was domesticated approximately 10,000 years ago, resulting in the MR wheat, that's Triticum dicoccum, and durum wheat, Triticum turgidum. The diploid Ancon wheat, Triticum monococcum, was domesticated around the same time from Triticum boeticum, and finally around 10,000 years ago, a tetraploid species hybridized with Triticum toschi to form the two hexaploid wheat species, Triticum aestivum and Triticum spelta. The primary domestication trait in wheat was non-shattering, with secondary traits being loom reduction to improve threshing, change in plant architecture and in ear and kernel size, loss of seed dormancy and lower grain protein and increased grain carbohydrate content. Today, derivatives of many of these species are used for very specific purposes. For example, the hexaploid Triticum aestivum has been bred for high protein quality needed for bread making. Breeding within tetraploid Triticum turgidum has resulted in durum wheat used to make pasta, and specialty markets are currently being developed for Ancon wheat as an alternative for people suffering from celiac disease. The multiple ploidy levels and distinct market classes are responsible for extensive population structure within wheat. Rice. The story of rice domestication from its wild ancestor Oryza rufipogon is an example of the ever-changing face of science. There are 5 prominent groupings in modern rice cultivars: indica, Aus, aromatic, temperate and tropical japonica. Until recently, it was believed that there were 2 independent domestication events that were responsible for the 2 major subgroups of rice japonica, including aromatic, and indica, including Aus. However, a recent study suggests that the initial domestication event occurred in China around 9,000 years ago to create the japonica group, which then replaced more primitive domesticates in India about 4,000 years ago. Domestication was achieved by reducing shattering via a transcription factor that controls development of the abscission layer between the grain and the pedicel. Reducing seed dormancy via a regulatory gene controlling seed maturation, increasing the number of grains per panicle, and changing grain size and shape. Soybean. Soybean has undergone several rounds of domestication from Glycine soja, beginning about 3000 to 5000 years ago in China. A severe bottleneck occurred during domestication, resulting in Asian land races containing only 50% of the genetic diversity and 19% of the rare alleles found in Glycine soja. Approximately 80% of North American cultivar heritage can be traced back to the introduction of 17 founder land races. Modern breeding transformed these founder land races into elite cultivars, thereby reducing the genetic base of soybeans in the United States even further. Domestication traits in soybean include determinacy, increased seed size, modified flowering time, lighter seed color, and a non-shattering pod. Several QTL have been mapped for many of these domestication traits. However, to date, only determinate growth habit has been resolved to the gene level. Tomato. The exact detail of tomato domestication are uncertain, but most likely occurred in two phases, first in the Andes and most recently in Mexico. The wild ancestor is proposed to be Solanum pepenifolium, which was initially domesticated in Peru, resulting in the weedy cherry tomato. Solanum lycopersicum cerasiforme, this wild cherry tomato then spread into Mexico, where it was further domesticated, resulting in the early modern tomato cultivars. Domesticated tomato was brought to Europe by the conquistadors or perhaps even Columbus. Prior to its first description and intense selection for fruit morphology followed in the 18th and 19th centuries. It's estimated that cultivated tomato contains only 5% of the genetic diversity present in the wild relatives. As the earliest domesticate was likely a cherry tomato, selection for increased fruit size and shape is undisputed. However, other traits such as early flowering, growth habit, fruit color, and small seed size are also part of the domestication syndrome. Tomato is considered to be a model system for genetic and evolutionary studies, as several domestication QTL have been cloned and characterized. Genetic erosion. Genetic erosion in agricultural biodiversity is loss of genetic diversity, including loss of individual genes and loss of particular combination of genes, such as those manifested in locally adapted land races. Major driving forces behind loss of genetic diversity are variety replacement, land clearing, overexploitation of species, population pressure, environmental degradation, overgrazing, and change in agricultural systems. This genetic bottleneck has been measured with a variety of biochemical or molecular markers, including isozymes, seed proteins, RFLPs, RAPDs, AFLPs, and more recently DNA sequences of specific genes. The magnitude of these bottlenecks depends on the type of markers. For example, chloroplast DNA restriction analysis shows a marked decrease in genetic diversity between wild and domesticated types in wildly different crops, including barley, sunflower, pea, sorghum, and maize. At the nucleotide sequence level, there have been fewer comprehensive studies. Only in maize have a large number of genes been studied. In that species, there has been on average a reduction in diversity of 30% compared with diversity in teosinte. Additional studies suggested that other cereal species also are characterized by genetic bottleneck of about 30% when considering nucleotide diversity. Selection of candidate genes and linked regions in domesticated crops. Tests for selection have been applied most commonly to data for genes for which there has been a priori evidence of a role in crop domestication or crop improvement. One example is TB1 in maize, where the pattern of nucleotide polymorphism was particularly striking. As expected, after a domestication bottleneck, the coding region of TB1 contains less genetic diversity in maize than teosint. The maize coding region retains 40% of the genetic diversity in teosint. The more surprising observation was that the reduction in diversity was far more severe in the 5' untranslated region, where maize retains only 2% of teosint diversity. Further, the pattern changed abruptly over a narrow 100 base pair region. Based on these observations, Wang et al. Made two conclusions. First, they concluded that selection targeted the TB15-UTR during domestication. Consistent with previous observations, the TB1 expression differs between maize and teosint. Second, based on the abrupt shift in the pattern of diversity, they concluded that recombination had been sufficient to uncouple the history of the 5-UTR from the coding region. Population genetic analysis has confirmed a history of selection in several more genes that were first identified functionally. The work thus far is heavily biased towards maize and represents genes that contribute to plant and inflorescence architecture, to plant and kernel color, and to kernel composition. Fewer examples of selected loci exist in other domesticated plants, but important non-maize examples include the Vaxi gene in rice and the Bocal gene in cauliflower. It is worth noting that most of these analyses have relied on standard tests of selection, which do not correct for demographic history and therefore can be misleading. Nonetheless, for most of these genes, the combination of functional and evolutionary analysis makes a credible case for a role in domestication or crop improvement. Thus far, it is not clear whether recombination typically limits the effect of selection to a very small genomic region or whether large genomic regions are dragged along with selected genes via linkage. To date, this question has only been addressed in two cases, in maize and one in rice. In one, Clark et al. Measured nucleotide polymorphism upstream of TB1 of maize. They found that the exceptionally low diversity, typically of 5-UTR, extended 60 to 90 kilobase upstream from TB1, and then diversity returned to normal levels. The hitchhiker region consisted only of intergenic DNA, and thus apparently strong selection on TB1 did not affect the history of other genes. Similarly, Palisa et al. Characterized selection around the maize Y1 gene, which was a target of selection in the 1930s when the US farmers switched to yellow corn because of its nutritional value. Diversity levels suggest that hitchhiking has affected nucleotide polymorphism 600 kilobase pair downstream and 200 kilobase pair upstream from Y1. This 800 kilobase pair region contains a handful of genes, demonstrating that selection on one gene can alter polymorphism at other genes in the case of extremely strong and rapid selection. Similarly, in rice, the Vaxi gene, which was the target of recent and strong selection, is flanked by a 250 kilobase pair region, including 6 other genes with reduced diversity as the result of hitchhiking. Nonetheless, the general picture suggests that hitchhiking affects relatively few genes beyond those targeted by selection. Methods to reintroduce genetic diversity. It is clear that selection during domestication and plant breeding has reduced genetic variation in all crop species. Therefore, novel variation can be introduced from wild relatives and or intermediate land races and some proportion of this novel variation will be useful in crop improvement by either traditional breeding methods or biotechnology. For example, several disease-resistant genes have been identified in wild tomato, Solanum perenniifolium, and transferred into modern cultivars. Of course, wild relatives and land races have potentially useful variation for any trait and thus could contribute to increased production, reduction of inputs such as fertilizers and pesticides, increased tolerance, abiotic stress, and improved nutrition. Given that useful variation exists and that the useful alleles can be transferred into modern cultivars, native non-transgenic genetic variation can be used in breeding programs in three ways: independent of biotechnology, in conjunction with biotechnology, and via biotechnology. Native variation crossed into modern cultivars from wild relatives via traditional breeding methods offers an alternative to genetically modified crops in the countries where GM crops are not accepted. Native genetic variation could provide alternate modes of action for resistance to insects and disease, which, when pyramided with transgenic events, could prolong the longevity of existing GM products. For example, corn rootworm has evolved resistant to multiple Bt transgenic events. Identification and incorporation of native host plant resistant genes for corn rootworm resistance could slow the rate at which the insect tolerates commercial transgenic events. Native variation can be used as a donor for biotechnology in crop improvement. Often, useful variation is linked to negative variation in wild or land-raised donor germplasm, where selection for the useful variation can lead to a poorly adapted or low-yielding product. The use of transgenic approaches allows the separation of the useful variation from the negative variation, thus mitigating the effects of linkage drag. By using molecular biology tools, transgenic events can also increase the expression of native alleles, making them more effective. Needless to say, plant geneticists and breeders need to continue their efforts to identify and utilize variation from wild and land-raised germplasm. Success in this area of research will require a long-term commitment to exploring diverse germplasm. With this, we come